10 Facts About World War II That Will Shock You, Part 2. World War II was the most destructive military event in human history. This global conflict is estimated to have claimed 50 to 70 million lives over a 6-year period. Almost all of the world's great powers were involved, divided into two major powers, the Allies and the Axis. This is a follow-up to our first successful video about World War II. The link is in the description if you have not seen it. World War II was the most devastating conflict in human history. To help you navigate some of the major events, we've compiled a list of 10 facts divided into 10 relevant topic areas. Number 1. The Nazis came close to developing plutonium. As if the Nazis weren't already evil enough, they came dangerously close to developing plutonium, the material that powers nuclear weapons. When the Germans invaded Norway, they seized control of a factory in the Telemark region that produced heavy water, which was then used to make plutonium. However, before they could produce anything, a group of 11 Norwegian commandos sabotaged the plant, setting off explosives in the base while suffering no casualties. Number 2. One soldier fought the war for decades. Hiro Onoda was a Japanese soldier who served in World War II from 1942 to 1974. Sent on a mission to the Philippines and told not to surrender or take his own life, Onoda refused to believe the war had ended in 1945 and literally took to the hills with a few other officers for company. They engaged in guerrilla warfare against local residents, resulting in several deaths, and Onoda's own men were killed in pointless skirmishes over the years. Onoda was eventually found alone, desperate but undefeated, in 1974, and had to be officially relieved from duty by his old commanding officer, who was by then an elderly bookseller. Number 3. Adolf Hitler's nephew was from Liverpool. During the war, Hitler's own nephew, William Patrick Hitler, was one of his most ardent enemies. William, Adolf's brother, was born in Liverpool in 1911 and attempted to use his uncle's political status to advance his own career before fleeing Nazi Germany and writing a magazine article titled "Why I Hate My Uncle." He later immigrated to the United States and served in the American Navy during World War II, where he was decorated for his valor. He eventually changed his name to William Patrick Stewart Houston and settled in the United States, where he died in 1987. Number 4. One city bluffed its way to safety. During the war, one German city devised a novel and ingenious method of evading Allied bombing raids. Instead of enforcing the usual blackout, Constance, near the Swiss border, decided to keep all of its lights on as usual at night. The bluff paid off, as Allied pilots assumed it was actually in Switzerland and saved it. Number 5. One British officer became a legend. Adrian Carton de Wiart, a flamboyant figure who had previously served in the Boer War and World War I, was one of the war's most celebrated soldiers. He'd been shot in the face, skull, leg, and hip during his many exploits, losing his left eye and one hand in the process. Despite his advanced age, he was eager to contribute to the fight against Hitler. His plane crashed during a mission to Europe, and he was captured by Italian fascists. Despite his striking appearance, the 60-year-old veteran casually escaped from the POW camp and went incognito for days. With his black eye patch and empty sleeve, Carton de Wiart looked like an elegant pirate, and became a figure of legend, one account later said. Number 6, George H. W. Bush almost got eaten by cannibals. When George H. W. Bush's plane was shot down during a bombing raid against Japan, he narrowly avoided a terrible fate. He was apprehended by the Allies, but all the other men on the same raid were captured by Japanese officers who tortured, executed, cooked, and ate them in one of the bloodiest war crimes of the war. Number 7, Nazis wanted to develop a space weapon. German scientists were genuinely interested in developing a sun gun, which would resemble a massive magnifying glass in space. The glass, based on the ideas of German physicist Hermann Oberth, was designed to concentrate sunlight beams in order to scorch cities and boil the seas. It would have been useless against the Allies, however, because the Nazis estimated it would take up to a century to build. Number 8, Winston Churchill had a life pod made for him. Doctors were so concerned about a man of Churchill's age and condition being flown at such high altitudes that a special, pressurized life pod was developed to protect the precious bulk of Winston Churchill, as a news report put it. According to the report, the pod was created so that he could loll comfortably around like an outsized peel within a gigantic oyster shell. Unfortunately, the pod was too large to fit into Churchill's plane and was never used. Number 9, the Nazis were led on a wild goose chase by a spy. Juan Pujol Garcia, a Nazi spy, was one of the war's most colorful characters. In reality, he was a British double agent who specialized in feeding false information to the Germans. Garcia actually went to Portugal and made up his reports from the UK, despite knowing very little about British life and culture, while his Nazi bosses thought he lived in Britain. Despite Garcia's dubious cultural gaffes, the Germans were impressed. In one report he described how Scottish people were avid wine drinkers. Garcia even created a Welsh fascist organization called the Brothers of the Aryan World Order, which allegedly operated out of Swansea. Number 10, a ship was sunk twice. During the war, one ship had a particularly bad run. The SS Veen, as it was originally known, served in the Australian Navy during World War I before being sunk in 1918. A few years later, it was raised from the depths and recommissioned, this time by Italy, and it served as a hospital ship for Mussolini's forces during World War II. At that point, the Allies attacked it, and it became the only ship to be sunk in both world wars. There you have 10 more facts about World War II. If you have any comments or questions, let us know below and stay tuned for the next video from Fun Facts Galore.